Welcome to Lunch with the Sharpe Crew. So happy to have you all with us today. And I have with me, of course, the awesome Sharpe Crew, the man, the myth, the legend himself, Michael Vass. How are you, sir?
I'm doing well. Looking forward to this. This should be a fun conversation.
There we go. And of course, the one who has better fashion sense than both of us put together, the good PhD, Dr. Charla Burnett. How are you?
Doing pretty well, Larry. The sun is shining, so it's the first time in a few days, so I have to be happy.
I am glad to hear that. Here in New York, it's a bit dreary, but that's okay. Yeah. It's okay. I wanted to start with a quick story, and this is something that Michael knows. He was in the Marines around the same time I was, both Marines. Back in the day, back in the late 80s, early 90s, some of you who may not be aware of this, Rush Limbaugh was super popular on talk shows, on radio talk shows, super popular. Open conservative, happy, open conservative, all about it. So popular that at one point, the Armed Forces Radio and Television Network, which is the overseas network for the military, wanted to put him on so that people could see it. For those who don't know, when you're overseas, there's obviously foreign TV. So the military provides one channel, which is an American channel, radio and TV, to give you some idea. They try to put like popular shows from TV on, so you kind of feel like you're still at home when you're at home. That's I think they still do it. They used to do it back then. Well, putting on Rush Limbaugh was very controversial. People were like, well, you can't. He's this crazy conservative guy. You can't do that. This is the government. You can't do that. But their argument was, but he's popular. And we put on popular shows. And back in those days, Rush Limbaugh has since passed, but back then, he was the most popular radio talk show host in America. He was the #1 show. So we had a 3-hour show. So they agreed to put on 1 hour. The first hour went on to this radio network. And I remember that one of the things he was talking about then, and I was a youngster then, I was hearing him talking about how everything is the liberal left networks, the liberal networks run everything. And I remember saying to myself, liberals run everything, but he's the most popular. Something's going on here. What's up? And I want to bring this idea up as in general on talk radio and popularity. Mike, you must remember that time, right? I'm assuming you remember that time.
I remember it very well. And I remember there was the whole Air America counterculture.
That's right.
Wanted to have something because talk radio was and continues to be the only media outlet that the left doesn't dominate by sheer numbers, not by popularity, but by sheer numbers. And so they wanted to have that same groundswell like they do in newspapers, like they do in TV and cable. And they failed.
I remember Sam Cedar was on that.
And it failed.
I remember Sam Cedar was on that and someone else, a couple of other more pop. Now these guys have podcasts now. The guys who used to be at Air America now have podcasts. I remember that. Air America failed. I remember that. Yes.
Yeah, but all of it has failed. Go ahead.
Did you know about this? Is this something you were aware of, Charla?
Vaguely, just because I've done some research into media literacy and bias as an educator. I think it's important to make sure that everyone at a university knows to cite their sources and bias in research and that type of thing. But I was in my early teens during that period, so I don't think I have the personal knowledge or memory of that. I do know that the amount of media that is out there, I don't believe skews one way or the other. I think there's a lot of different media sources these days. I mean, you have like the American Conservative, you have Breitbart, you have Blaze Media, you have Newsmax, you have the Federalist, you have Fox News, the Daily Wire, the Post Millennial. There's lots of right-sided, right-wing news agencies and media.
Hold on. I want to cover a couple different things. This is two separate things, right? When I looked at talk radio, in my view, that I saw that as mainstream, right? That was like WABC here in New York, right? That was mainstream. Mainstream back in the 90s, I would say. If I go 90s to 2000s, talk radio was really the only place before the internet to really get conservative views, right? Most of the views either neutral or corporate or left, any of those three, until you got to talk radio. And talk radio initially wasn't, if you remember, it wasn't right. It was more like here's a cooking show, or here's a show about relationships. Talk radio wasn't initially, you go back 60s, 70s, or it was about music or sport. Sports is still popular, but sports has stayed. The other things happen. They've gone to podcasts and such. But talk radio really is basically, right-wing radio now and sports. That's what it is now, basically those two. But it wasn't always that. But it just dominated that mainstream. It was only there, and again, that's my point. Why was it only there where conservatives dominated when it comes to mainstream, not the social media stuff?
Because of money. One, it's because of money, and two, it's because we have the education pipeline, the academia. Academia is teaching many of the individuals who went into journalism. You had to take your journalism courses. Well, your professors were already left-leaning. Matter of fact, they were deeply into the left, and they were passing their ideology on to their students, who would then go into the careers, into the workplace, and then take that bias along with them, thinking that's normal because that's the echo chamber they're in. So unlike that, when you looked at talk radio and now more so in alternative social media, what you're finding is these are people who have not been in some of those elite schools, into much of the academic circles in that echo chamber, and they have a more realistic view.
I think I see some of that. Okay, Charla, go ahead. Do you think he's right on this one?
Yeah, I mean, to what he said about money kind of wielding power over what has been historically put on news is very accurate. I do think that there's kind of this cognitive dissonance around what it is to be a university and what makes it liberal versus conservative, because I think that there are a lot of prestigious universities that I wouldn't necessarily consider liberal or left-leaning, and they're much more like liberalism with the big L, which I would kind of put as more of like a centrist focus. But I mean, if you're talking about individuals who graduated from Harvard, I mean, those are mostly conservative people, and a lot of them are Republicans.
Well, let's clarify something early on.
Hold on, I'm touching that piece real fast. I think what you're saying is sometimes true, but not those who go into the media. Almost anyone in the media who has a Harvard, Yale, any of those degrees, the vast majority are like people on MSNBC, right? People on the vast majority. It is rare to find someone who has a Harvard or Yale degree who's in media on Fox, but you will find them all over the place on CNN and MSNBC. I mean, I would argue
it's hard
80%
because
of them
a lot of more right-wing discourse is built on values and not necessarily facts.
That's
so
not
when
true.
we're talking about people who go into investigative journalism, when you're reporting the facts, it becomes off left-leaning because it's logical.
That's a lie.
And just more accurate. I mean, this is why people in academia have a tendency to be more to the left, because we have a greater grasp of social economic.
Okay.
Hold on.
I
want to be clear. Did you just say that because someone's left-leaning, that makes them more logical?
No, no, I'm not saying it's because they're left-leaning.
I want to be clear with that.
When you're reporting on facts, these are the people who died. They died because of X a policy. Most of the times those policies have to do with underfunding or
no, that's a lie.
Reducing people's access to healthcare or poverty alleviation. Those just have a tendency to be what
now you're adding bias. Let me address something.
Okay.
I don't think that's bias.
Wait a minute. Let me go back to what I was originally going to. Something we need to clarify here.
Okay.
There's a difference between do right-wing or conservative media exist and whether or not they are overwhelmed. See, you keep saying there's a lot of, and you're grouping together both mainstream and alternative, and you're saying, see, there's plenty of it out there. Yeah, but they're overwhelmed because 3-1 in terms of alternative media. In terms of mainstream media, we're talking about most newspapers, TV, you're talking about all the other mainstream access points. You're talking about a 4, 7, and depending on the study that's done, even 14-1 difference. There is an overwhelming, and this is factual, there is no question about it. In every study that has been done, you're looking at best case, 87% of every one of the reporters who are in the news media are left-leaning, self-identified as left of center or far left of center.
But she's not arguing that. She's
she
actually
has said
saying
that.
No.
She
no,
has
she's
said
actually
that
saying
twice.
she's saying she is saying that they are left leaning, and she's saying it's because that's what reporters do. She's not fighting that fact at all. I don't
She's
think
also
she is.
said that, but no, it's not a big deal because there's lots
I never
of.
said it wasn't a
and
big deal.
Well, no, this is okay, fine. Then the implication of your statement in saying, well, there's lots of all these other, and you went through the entire list of a bunch of alternative media sources that have nothing to do with the mainstream,
All
that don't
sides
have the
of
same access.
very big, prominent research institute that studies bias has over 28 center to right news agencies that are both mainstream and alternative. It is literally equal across the board.
It
and
is
how
not
many
equal across
major
the
But
board.
hold on, but I want to go one step further though. Hold on, I'm grabbing the piece. Even if you go to let's stay on mainstream for a bit. I think you're right, Vass. In mainstream, you will find more outlets that will lean center or left compared to leaning right. But the numbers of people who watch, the right still either equates or eclipses, right? Yeah. So again, while there are some left-leaning people on mainstream radio, there are some. I mean, the right dominates. It's not even close. I mean, the right dominates on radio. You go to TV, more of them are either center or left-leaning. That's true. But Fox dominates. Newsmax, before their issues they're having recently, Newsmax dominated. So while there were more of them, the people watching, Charla's right. It's much more equal, if not more, right, with the bodies, the eyeballs they're getting.
Right? I would say left-leaning people have completely given up hope, mostly on any type of news outlet, and actually seek out more like data sources and first-hand accounts than necessarily like a synthesized version of news that we have today.
I don't think that's
Mike,
accurate.
all I'm saying is, do you understand what I'm saying here?
I do understand.
Okay, go ahead.
I understand that because conservative and right-wing or right-leaning sources are better, they gain more audience on that one. And as an example,
I didn't say they were better, Mike. That's not what I said.
I didn't say you said that.
That's not what you said, Harry, because I could have sworn.
I said, this is what I'm saying. This is what I am saying. That because of the superiority of the quality of what they are presenting, they do. On, as an example, if we're taking one versus several, you have more people who are paying attention to a Fox News that are paying attention to a Steven Crowder or a Ben Shapiro. But if you look at, and my point is, you have, again, going to Fox News, using that as a staple of the example, you have Fox News versus NBC, ABC, MSNBC, CNN. You've got CBS. You have, did I say MSNBC? How many stations have I already named? One versus
you have to add Newsmax and OAN, who are,
I would argue
they're not mainstream. They're not mainstream.
Newsmax kind of is. I mean, they're
no,
on cable.
they're not. They're not considered
cable.
mainstream. They are not considered mainstream. They're considered alternative. They happen to be popular and successful.
Not anymore, Mike. That's they're on cable. I can get them on my cable channel. I can go right to Newsmax.
It's much easier. I would argue it's much easier. I would argue that it's much easier to have more right-wing pundits on air because there's no accountability. So anyone who wants to just say whatever they want to say can give themselves a platform, and it's much easier for them to have.
The left does that too, Charla. I'm sorry.
You're right, but the left does that too. If you look at fact checking, there are way more left-leaning fact-checking organizations.
Hold on.
They don't want
Hassan. Hold on. Have you heard Hassan Abi talk?
Thank you.
Hassan Abi is one of the most.
And he got
He's one of the most. By whom? I don't know. He's still one of the most popular.
He's been in the
bread
news.
tubers out there. He's still one of the most popular.
Like in the last
he goes there all the time. I don't know. I can't buy that one. You're right. There's no accountability, but that's left and right. I can give you 1,000 lefties who do it too.
No, this is the left saying that, which is biased because it's not close to reality at all. And you're
I'm not
talking
gonna go
about
there, but
who are the ones who are doing the fact checking. Well, we've seen that when we've seen people like Facebook and YouTube. Who do they go to in their fact checking? Are they going to centrist, well-known independent sources, or are they going to companies that have a left-leaning bias and are known for their left-leaning bias?
this one I don't buy.
There's
See,
the answer.
here's what I don't buy. When it comes to the Facebooks and those pipes, they're just corporatists.
I understand.
They are not pushing out left or right because of left or right. They are pushing out both any extremes, right? The story that was told on Twitter wasn't fair. The story told on Twitter was like, oh, they only beat up the lefties. No, they only beat up the righties. They only knocked the righties out. No, they beat the lefties up too. They threw out anybody who was not mainstream. If you were not mainstream, you got hammered on all of those. Didn't matter. Now, I think by numbers, you're right. It happened to be more people on the right. I think that's true. But they didn't care. They weren't like, let's get the righties. They were like, let's get anybody who wasn't mainstream. More of those people were right than left.
But I don't agree with that, because when we listen to them, each of these, when we listen to the mainstream media, when they come into Congress since 2018 in the congressional hearings, they have consistently shown us the data and made the statements that, yes, they have, by, as they say, accident. Oh, this algorithm accidentally kept out 800,000 conservatives and Republicans, including members of Congress. Oops, it was an accident. Except it happens every year, every time they show up in front of Congress. That's not an accident when you go 5-6 years in a row.
What happened is they agreed with whatever the administration said. When Trump was president, they were listening to what Trump said.
No, they didn't.
Biden's been president. Yes, they 100% did. And then when Biden was president, they listened to what Biden said. These guys don't care who the president is. They just care that they keep getting their cash and the government doesn't shut them down. That's what they care about.
That's not true. And again, let's go by what they have reported themselves. Because not only is it what they've said in the congressional hearings since 2018, every year consistently, but remember, as reported by Newsweek in 2022 about the 2020 election, that there was a shadow cabal to fortify elections made up by the news media and social media giants, that they have a separate agenda, and they have made it clear. Again, this isn't me saying that. You can look up the Newsweek article about the shadow cabal and fortifying the 2020 election. It's a fact. So no, they don't just say, oh, we'll go with whatever person's in charge. They have an overriding agenda. They may be more of an emphasis and more empowered when they have their guys in power, like Biden, like Obama, but they absolutely have an agenda, and they put that agenda through both. You can say, and to be as generous as I can, some of them are doing it because it's subconscious, because they're in an echo chamber and everyone speaks just like them.
That's true too.
From college to their job, or many of them are doing it on purpose.
But let me go back to what Charla was saying. Charla, you seem to feel that the left is. This is my feeling I get from you. So if I'm mischaracterizing you, please just correct me. My feeling is that the left is getting a raw deal. Like they're really trying to do the right thing, but they're being attacked as being left when they're just being honest. That's how I felt you were saying. Am I characterizing that correctly?
I feel like for the media, there's like left, very left, and then there's like a center. And I see the center as kind of being a little less biased. They're willing to report a little bit of anything that's accurate. So if it skews towards the right's agenda or the left's agenda, they're totally okay being able to do that. I feel like because far right, far left, just whatever, as far out there as you want to be, sells first, they're often given a bigger platform than a lot of the media that stays center, because that's boring, right? It's not sexy to be bipartisan and be like down the lines, right? So,
but if you go to like a YouTube or you go to like, I don't know if Twitter's the same way, but Twitter was this way at least. I don't know if it still is. Facebook also, because of the advertisements they get from the mainstream media, they always put mainstream media sources higher up in any searches you do. So if I do a search for what happened in the Uganda yesterday, I'm going to get mainstream media to the top of my search faster than I would get somebody else's So doesn't that by default, if I have, to Mike's point, if I have more mainstream leaning left, won't I get more left in my feed by default? Or am I wrong on this?
I just think that is the assumption that there's this abnormally large amount of left-leaning TV syndicates, which I just don't really necessarily believe that that's the truth.
Again,
hold on. Let me go back to this. Hold on. So now you're saying you don't believe it's left-leaning, but I do remember Mike saying it, and you agreeing that the vast majority of reporters and people who are in these institutions are self-identified left-leaning. I mean, I think that's factual. We've seen it many times. Factual.
Democrat left-leaning, though, not left.
Oh, so you're making a distinction between Democratic and between far left.
Yeah, because I see Democrats as being like the big L liberalism, focused,
again,
free market capitalism.
Let me be clear. I'm saying leaning. If we go left-leaning, I think it's obvious that the vast majority of people in mainstream media lean left. I think you're right. They're not communists or socialists or hardcore leftists. I think that's true. Most are not that because they're corporatists. They like the world the way it is. They're doing fine.
Most of them are corporatists.
They don't want revolution, right? That's the last thing they want. They're doing great,
definitely
right?
Not.
They will talk about it because it sounds cool, but they don't actually want change.
They don't want to rock the boat. They don't want to rock the boat. They're in the boat. They like the boat. The boat's comfy.
Let's make sure we understand the distinction you just made, because in the polling that has been done, both in terms of party affiliation as well as ideology, the answer is 87 well into the 80s. You can find multiple reports that have been done on this over the last several decades. It is all left-leaning and or Democrat. Now, you're asking, are they progressive? Who cares? That's an extreme, and that's even worse.
A lot of progressives care.
That is even less representative of what the mainstream American people are. That's roughly 7% of the entire population in the United States. It is a minuscule number.
No, I disagree, Mike. Look, if you look at when you look at actual progressive policies that are being polled, right? When you actually poll progressive policies, that Democrats will never give the progressives.
I didn't say policy. I said ideology.
This is where I'm saying, if you look at the policies that are progressive, they poll far higher than 7%, far higher. The lowest they'll poll is 30%. That's the lowest. Often they'll poll 60, 70, 80%.
Yeah.
But at the low level, they'll go 30. There's no way they're at 7. Americans,
no.
More Americans than 7% are progressive.
Look at Ohio.
No. There's a difference between a policy, which can be worded in many different ways and presented, and we have seen them presented in many ways that do not represent how they actually function or what people think of them after they are enacted. And the ideology, which is what we see in socialism, what we see in progressivism, which is, the support of Hamas and terrorism, versus when we hear Obamacare is going to be fantastic and you can keep your doctor, which is a lie, that it's going to be more cost effective, which is a lie. We can go through many of the ways that they have said, oh yeah, red flag laws are going to make you safe. That is a lie. It is not true. Oh yeah, the jab is completely safe with no side effects. Hold on.
You're walking down a road of what actually happens.
Yes.
Most of our policies don't actually work because our government sucks. But I'm asking, what do people believe this? Do they want this? If you ask Americans, do they want Medicare for all, which is a very progressive idea? I don't want that, right? I don't believe Medicare for all is a good idea.
Healthcare, yeah.
Yes, however,
depends on how you word
a lot of Americans do. Like, I'm in the minority in this one.
Yeah,
a lot of Americans do want this.
Yeah, because most Americans don't know what it is. They just know the name of the slogan, and they've been told it will be great. They don't know.
They believe it. It's ideology. They believe it. It doesn't matter. They believe it.
They believe the slogan. They believe the sales pitch. They have no idea what.
So you're calling the majority of Americans dumb? And
Yes. Yes.
Of course. You should have walked down that road, Charla. He was going to totally jump on that one.
Of course.
He was going to be like, yes.
The average American doesn't. They know more about the Kardashians.
You thought you were owning him. You were not.
Any of our politics.
Yes.
I don't know. I think that's that takes the agency away from people when we just say, "Oh, you
no,
believe
people
in these
have given up
policies
their
because
agency.
you're dumb."
They
But
gave up
let's
their
walk down.
agency on their own, and they've substituted it with MILF Manor and the housewives of wherever the hell.
I think people
because
are less
they
dumb. I
want
think
to.
they're more fed
Because
up.
politics is
Disenchanted.
hard, and it's depressing to see how we are falling apart as we continue down this path more and more to the left, because
right,
the echo chamber of the
Because
left.
we're more
says it's
educated
great.
per population than we've ever been in our history. So to just
Let-
equate
let's-
everyone as being dumb and illiterate,
I
not
didn't
able
say
to
they're.
make
I didn't say
decisions
they're
on
all
their own
dumb.
is
I didn't say they
Hold
were
on.
illiterate. I said they're not. They have given up their agency in terms of politics. Willfully.
Let me grab some chats, guys. You guys, let me grab a couple chats. Sam, thank you for the super chat. I appreciate it.
Yes,
Robert
Sam.
Epstein showed Google bias. Their ephemeral message to remind 100% liberals and 80% of conservatives in Georgia. It stopped when caught. I'm not sure where he's going with that one. Do you guys know where he's going with that?
Not exactly. No.
Clarify though for us, Sam.
I kind of think he means what, in a case that I think more people may be familiar with, what's happening in Bridgeport, Connecticut right now in the courtrooms, where we have, I think it's the underreporting, the fact that a 20-year Democratic Board of Elections employee was caught stuffing mail-in ballots, and their department were counting mail-in ballots that were not signed and were illegal, as she testified to in court, as they have video of this as shown in court. And she admitted that it was the policy of her department to do this on a regular basis. She's been around for 20 years, and this is obviously something that's affecting our elections. I think he's
all right. Now I'm seeing where
line.
He's going with this. Okay, what he's saying that they were showing that there was a bias in Google, and it only stopped when people caught him. That's what he's trying to say. Yeah. That's what he means. Okay, now I get it. Okay, thank you for that one, Sam. And I think a lot of that is true. There are biases, all over the place. So let me grab a couple.
Yeah, I mean, I think everybody has an agenda when they write something. Like you can't escape that.
I blatantly do.
Yeah.
Like I'm screaming it. I'm screaming it. I'm like, this is my agenda. I am screaming it when I write stuff. Yes.
Well, there's a difference between everyone having an agenda like we all do, and that's fine because we're human beings. And then hearing those very same members of New York Times, members of the mainstream media turn around and say, no, but we're neutral. We have no agenda. We're just telling, no, you're lying. I can recall very recently, there was an article in the New York Times where they detailed the attack at Cooper Union, which happened 2 weeks ago. Students are being protected by locking them in because a bunch of pro-Hamas students are trying to break down doors to get to them because they didn't want to give them hugs. And that was the 7th paragraph of an article by the New York Times. And in the 8th paragraph, first sentence, they say, oh, but no one was threatened. How can you tell me how someone has to be protected from people trying to break doors down to aggressively come after them? And you're then telling me and literally they say in the 8th paragraph, first sentence, they say, oh, but no one was threatened. How can you say that?
This is the part that you bring up. People think I'm crazy when I say it. I prefer MSNBC to CNN. And people say, why? MSNBC is so, because MSNBC is open about it. They're like, we're lefties. That's it. We are, that's what we are. We are Democrats. We support the Joe Bidens of the world, and that's it. That's what we do. If you don't like it, why are you watching us? And I actually respect that more. They're open about it. That's who we are. If you're Republican, you're evil because you're Republican. That's why you're evil. Got it. Okay. I get where your head is. CNN does what you say, Mike. They act like they're not. They act like they're above the fray when they're not. Fox the same way. Fox literally changed their slogan from fair and balanced to doing what's right with a capital R. Like they literally said, we're right wing, right? That's it.
Wrong with that.
I agree. I respect those two more than CNN. At least I know where they're coming from.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just, yes.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Charla, please. Go ahead.
Some of them do. Like if you go to their about section on their websites, they get into more of like kind of their areas of focus and you can kind of parse that out. But even then it's difficult for a lot of the more mainstream, like CNN, BBC, you have like NPR who claims to be most credited, but clearly skews to the left.
Absolutely.
Politico as well, which claims to be like very unbiased and very centrist, but it
Skews
also
to the
skews
left.
towards the left.
Yeah.
So it would be a lot
Keep going.
better if you had to actually come out and say where you were.
I agree. That's why I watch MSNBC. I know what I'm watching. Like, I'm not mad when I watch them. I know exactly what I'm watching. If I don't like it, I shouldn't watch it.
I
know exactly what I'm
like
watching.
to like go to international news agencies, not in the United States, a broad range
Mike
of
brings
them.
this up too.
Because I find that they're not so entrenched in our own kind of political conflict that we have going on. And so they can kind of report things from an objective. Maybe they do definitely have their own agenda. You think of like RT and Al Jazeera, but at the end of the day, they look at it from a different perspective. And I think that allows me to have a lot more clarity when I'm looking through news to understand about,
I think
this is what we think about it. This is what the French think about it. This is what the Dutch think about it. This is what, the Middle East and Arabs think about it. It's just,
but there's
part of a bigger story.
Again, we have the same problem in other countries, just as we do here in America. Yes, is Deutsche Welle far superior to much of what we see here in the United States in terms of actually talking about our issues without all the obvious bias that we have? Sure, absolutely. But they go through the same process that our news media go through. They go through the same echo chamber of the academia. They are given the same ideas. In fact, more so in Europe, especially, where we see that emphasis on this progressive ideology. It is just as strong, if not stronger, over in Europe. And that same bias exists. Now, when you start going into countries like the Hindustan Times, you're going over to Times of Japan, you're going into Sky News. When you start going to countries far removed from that progressive bottleneck, academia bottleneck, then you start getting very different views. And I think that's important. But most people, unless you're a political junkie, you're not doing that. You're looking at the mainstream and maybe one or two of the alternative sources.
Yes, I wanted to add that piece. Yeah, but that's an important piece though, Mike, because most Americans are going to look at one mainstream source, whatever that is, whether it's their local news or they like CNN or Fox or whatever they like, and their talking head, right? They got one or two talking heads they like, right? They like, right? They like whatever they like, the Daily Wire, or they like Sam Cedar
or
right. They like
Crowder
like that, and then one or two talking heads. Hopefully, one of them is me. God damn it! But anyway, yes, yes. Hopefully,
you, me, yes,
there we go. Yes, but anyway,
Rogan can't take them all.
Rogan can't have all of them. I got to get a couple. So yes, but that's the part, right, that I think people have that didn't have before. So when they listen to a talking head, the long form is what we didn't have before, right? You go back before, it was maybe a 5-minute story at max, or 2 or 3 minute story. Yeah, but I'm saying max. A longer story was maybe 5 minutes. If you 3 minutes, fine. If you had a longer story, right? But generally speaking, you don't have that. What Rush Limbaugh did well, whether you like him or not, is he allowed you to have a conversation that was longer about an issue. Not just that, because radio is a very intimate medium. People don't realize that. It's not TV. TV is a show, but radio was only heard in the ear. I used to be on radio a lot, so it's intimate. So I feel like Rush Limbaugh's talking with me. That's how I feel. So I feel like I'm having a conversation with my friend is how I feel. So now I'm more influenced by that. It's one of the powers of talk radio. I think podcasting does that too. So when Joe Rogan starts talking, people feel like Joe Rogan is my friend, because I've heard him so many times.
I think the same thing started to happen with like these comedy runoffs, The Daily Show, Late Night. Because honestly, most people who are more left leaning, they don't even go to even some of like these leftist mainstream media. They literally will like say that they like watch The Daily Show, and that's how they get their news for the United States now, because they're just so disenchanted by how even the left, and this is what I'm talking about, like they're mostly like political central left-leaning liberals, not actual progressive leftists. So there really isn't a whole lot of options for them to get any of news. And so that's why they've turned to these comedy specials that actually do a better job of digging into and making fun of the current state of politics.
Well, that's more because they're trying to distract themselves from the failures of the leftist ideology. And That's just a fact. And when we look at this,
No,
why
no,
are
no,
they
no,
going?
no, that isn't. No, no, no. I want to be clear on that. They're
What?
trying to they're directing themselves from the failures of a Democratic Party.
Well, then, again, that's
Right? They
part
still
of the same
believe
thing.
in the Democrat. They still believe in progressive values. They don't believe in a Democratic Party. That's
I
how
don't-
they feel.
Don't believe that the current government structure will ever give us what we need.
I
That's
think
what they believe.
People are trying to use, like, we can't really use the late night shows because they've all failed. And they've been consistently failing for a while now. But you do have things like the Daily Show when Jon Stewart was there. Yes, very much. It was something that people would like and watch, not afterwards. It failed after that. Why? Because what people were looking for was an escapism. They wanted a little bit of news and some escapism. They wanted to be able to laugh at the news because it was bleak, it was dark, it was bad
think that
news
part's true,
because
yeah.
they failed. Government has failed. Why? Because it's gone further and further left. And they wanted some way to get out of that while still being able to blame someone else for what they elected into office. Obama failed, but it can't be his fault because he's black and he's the savior and he's going to change everything and we're post racist America. So it's all different now. Please tell me there's someone else to blame and can I laugh at them and while we do it? Yes. And here's
I
Jon
don't believe
Stewart.
most far left people voted for Obama the second time. I don't think that they were underneath an illusion of anything other than what he did in his first term, which was continue the neoliberal agenda. And so there's just hasn't been a candidate of progressive values that has made anyone want to get out and vote or go door knocking or do anything like that. Most of them have turned inward. Most of them have turned
more
inward.
Rashida Tlaibs or AOCs.
Most of them have turned inward to local elections, and they've been doing a really good job about overturning Republican seats.
Let me touch a couple of these things
in the last 2 years.
Yeah, let me touch a couple of these. One is I want to be clear on something. Most people who are progressive, and I know a lot of progressives, a lot of them, on certain things we overlap, right? I'm not a progressive, but on many things we do overlap. But many of them, they do not believe the government failed. They don't believe that their policies failed. They believe the government never actually really instituted their policies.
Yeah.
That's what they believe. They don't believe that the government has gone far left. And I would argue, and think, Mike, if you look back, I think you'd agree with me on this one. It is that the government's gone so far left, the government's gone so goddamn corrupt. That's our biggest issue. It's far worse than going left is going corrupt. That's far worse.
They don't even do anything.
Both happened. Corruption is worse than Well, the amount of corruption we have seen is worse than the desire and movement towards further and further left authoritarian progressive socialist ideology. Is corruption worse than that? Yes, it has been worse than that, but it's both happening at the same time. And we're seeing that promoted more and more in the mainstream. YouTube has just come out. You were mentioning before YouTube, and you weren't sure. It's very explicit. YouTube 2 weeks ago made their new policy. They're not only are they pumping the money in, they have changed. You look at your YouTube, you'll see in the background, they have changed everyone's system so that they will emphasize mainstream media and have suppressed
100%.
alternative media. And they declared this publicly.
It's easier to do that. It's easier to do that though because there's accountability there, and they don't want to be held accountable if they let
They're not accountable
incite violence on their platform. So it's much easier to go through the mainstream media and have them hold accountability.
No, that's crap. Because
it's
Section 230 protects
a good
them.
business model.
If they are just a platform, as they say they are, Section 230 protects them. They are not liable for anything that happens on their platform. And God help us.
But people will hold them liable, whether or not they can legally be held liable, or people will move off of their platform if they directly had. If a January 6th happened because of something posted on YouTube, there would be repercussions for YouTube.
No, people are leaving their platforms because of two things. One, they're increasing demand to monetize everything and try and keep that money. And two, because they are suppressing people's voices, which is what is creating Rumble and BitChute and Odyssey and all the other alternatives. It is their suppression of people's voices and the emphasis of the mainstream media and that left-wing message that goes along with it that people are trying to escape into alternative voices. That's what's happening there. So no, it's not because they're worried about accountability. It's about money and it's about messaging.
No,
And
not accountability, not about accountability of like what's right, true. Accountability so that they can't be held liable for any mistakes by the court of public rule. So if, again, someone who kicks off another January 6th incident happened on your platform,
you mean it already did happen?
People who will stop using your platform and hold you accountable.
That did happen. That happened 2 weeks ago when we saw the pro-Hamas protesters, a couple thousand of them at the White House, and that did happen, and they suppressed it.
I'm worried about a couple things here. Number one is I feel like these guys are also worried about being interfered with by the federal government, right? That's also their worry. They want to make sure that the federal government stays off their platforms and doesn't mess with them.
Let the mainstream media be the vetting tool for what is on there, and then you don't have to. I think it's when you're thinking as a businessman and not as like, hey, we're going to change the world through the media that we produce, then yes, it's a good business model.
I don't think they are looking at this as a business, because their business model has been forcing their content creators out of their system and into competing systems more and more. So it's not a good, it's like Disney saying, hey, we're just going to introduce more and more progressive ideology into our media and shove it down the throats of everyone. And how well is the Marvels going to do with that idea? How many failures have they had in a row? How much has Phase 4 completely fallen apart? Disney has, Star Wars has fallen apart. How many of these institutions, Willow, Witcher, how much of this we have seen has been destroyed? They have destroyed their old bases. No, this is ideology all over everything else.
Okay, I got to touch two pieces. Number one, the main reason why there has been this agenda pushed into media is not because of an ideology of the people there. It's because of the ideology of the people who are funding it. They are worried about how they can raise money, right? That's the biggest issue.
I mean, even the Fox News pundits have been caught off air saying, like, I don't believe this trash, but I have to report it because they're getting paid to do it.
Absolutely. 100%. There's always those individuals that exist.
No, but let me finish this piece. It's not, for example, if I run Fox today, right? I don't, but I run Disney, whatever. It's not because I have this agenda and I'm going to make this thing happen. It's my bankers who fund everything for me who go, Larry, you're going to change this and make this happen, or we're not going to fund you. You're not getting funded unless you do this. And I'm like, but my project's $30 million. I know, and you're borrowing $25 million of it from us to do your project. So you will do as we say, or you're not getting $25 million. And could I put my own $30 million up? Yes, but I'm not gonna.
The majority of those rich bankers are neoliberal, Democrats, free market protectionists who are
the BlackRock, the WEC, the WEF are anything but that. They are absolutely authoritarian progressives, and they've been pushing with their ESG mandates into many of these companies, which is part of what's happening to Disney.
Authoritarian progressives?
Well, I believe that the further you go on any, let me clarify that. The further you go into the extremes of any ideology, the closer you become to authoritarian dictatorships, and you lose more and more of the individual and individual rights. So yes, you can be authoritarian and progressive, and we do see that, which is very often
you talked about
socialism and communism.
Backtracking though, and you said misinformation had nothing to do with authoritarianism when we had that discussion, and now you're saying that it does.
What? Wait, say it again.
When we had the discussion on authoritarianism, and I brought up the point of misinformation and the rule of the media and control of authoritarian governments, you said that had nothing to do with one or the other, that it was only with the direct violence.
Wait a minute, where did I mention anything? Where did I mention anything about misinformation?
We are going way off the track again, aren't we?
Yeah, because I said nothing about misinformation. Nothing.
The control of the media, which if it is a progressive authoritarian media.
I didn't say they misinformed anyone. I never said they misinformed.
So they haven't misinformed anyone.
I didn't say they misinformed anyone. I said there's a bias, and that bias, which is based on ideology, is overwhelming. So yes, we can see the Tennessee trans shooter was the information that was put out or that was allowed to be seen was that accurate? The information we hear about many of the mass shootings, is it accurate? Absolutely. But when we see what is the bias here, well, they killed the story about the black supremacist subway shooter in New York City so they could emphasize, and then they
remember that
emphasized the Buffalo shooter in entirely different ways. Why? Because the black shooter didn't fit the profile. Why did they kill the story on the Tennessee trans shooter and refuse to put out the manifesto for 8 months? Why did they just kill that story? Because it didn't fit the message, because they put out everyone else's manifesto in part or in whole, and they have continued to cover it. But this one, they died. Why? It didn't fit the ideology. It didn't fit the messaging that they want to put out there. Did they misinform anyone? Absolutely not. I never said that. They just obscured and obfuscated and suppressed information. That's far worse.
Let me grab a couple of comments on this, because people are commenting, and I do want to grab some of these if I could. Let me see if I can grab this one here. Let's see. Joe says he's enjoying the Santa Claus show on Disney Plus. So not everything's failing, Mike, just most things. But not everything, just most.
Fair enough.
Just most. There we go, just most. Joe says, as a kid, Limbaugh was always portrayed as a rich, power-hungry, cigar-smoking quack in California. Yet never once did I ever hear an argument against his views. Well, I heard a lot of arguments against Rush Limbaugh's views, but I don't think he was that. Rush Limbaugh, I remember I read one or two of his books when in the 90s. He did not grow up as a wealthy kid at all. He grew up as a very middle-class and or poor kid. He became wealthy, right? But he wasn't. In fact, one of the reasons why he stayed in Sacramento is because he had a loyalty to the first city that gave him his opportunity. Even though he could have gone to a major, he actually was syndicated out of Sacramento because of loyalty to Sacramento, which was something that most so. But no, people attack Rush Limbaugh all the time. There's tons of arguments against him. Constantly. Tons. Yes, absolutely. Tons of arguments against him. Dave says, depends on the media. MSNBC is left, he puts in quotes, biased. Fox is right biased. Most talk radio is right biased. But Sirius XM Progressive is left biased. I hadn't thought about it. You're right. Most of the, and I think you find this, and this is, I think, to Charla's point, the Democratic Party is becoming a party of educated elites and women. It's becoming, that's what the party's becoming. And when you have that party becoming that way, many of those people are going to have Sirius XM or
right. Because I was about to say, I was like, the poor progressives, though nobody's
correct.
XM radio.
They don't have that. Exactly right. Yes.
They're not going to pay for that. They're still driving around like their 1996, Chevy Cavalier, Honda.
Excellent. Yes.
Absolutely. So like they're not, there's no XM radio in those cars.
There we go. So yeah, I do think that's true. So Joe also asks, he says, when will we have libertarian media? You're watching it now. What's wrong with you? What's wrong with you? You're watching it now. I'm the champ right there. Damn it. I'm the champ. That's it. Self-proclaimed with no evidence. That's okay. I am still
the Sharpe Crew.
The champ. That's it. That's it right there. Absolutely. Well, the one thing you'll see though, and I think that I hope you will enjoy, for those of you who are watching and listening later on, this show isn't only about libertarianism, and nothing I do on Sharpe Way is only about that, right? Mm-hmm. I have an agenda. I do. But consistently, I have people on who disagree with me, who think I'm wrong, but I bring people on all the time who I honestly believe are trying to make the right thing. People get mad at Charla, particularly behind the scenes. They don't always get mad at you on purpose, Charla, because they feel bad saying it online, but they go, that woman, she's a lefty. I do get that. And I tell them the same thing. Yes, but she wants to make the world a better place. That's what she wants. That's why she's here. She wants to make the world a better place.
Me, that are direct and
upfront. They don't attack you directly, Mike. They just come right at you. They come right at you. And I tell them publicly, no, Mike wants to make the world a better place. That is why you're here, because you guys want to make the world a better place. That's the whole issue. Yes, go ahead, Charla. I'm sorry.
I mean, I think for me personally, it's good to surround yourself with opposing views because you learn something, you get better, you hone your arguments against whatever it is you're trying to put forward. But then also you have an opportunity to show people how different perspectives are wrong and that yours is right. So I think it's a way better format instead of just surrounding yourself with yes men who continuously are like, oh yeah, we have the same policies. Let's just get, more upset about whatever these people are doing. And they're not even in the room to defend themselves. Whereas this style where you're having opposing views all coming together to have a conversation is important. Yeah. And then 3, like just showing that we can have a conversation without it, like like just evolving into a screaming match is super important, because
Yeah,
in the way that today's society kind of portrays different political views as they're just polar opposites, and there's no way we can find any type of common ground. And I just don't think that that's accurate. And if we
I
gave
agree.
people the more opportunities to have a conversation instead of just cutting them off and saying, we don't want you to speak because you have an opposing viewpoint, then we might actually be able to identify those middle ground policies and move those forward instead of the stalemate that we continuously find in our federal politics.
You guys do have fans. Sam says, I like Charla and Mike. I think they're genuine. I agree.
Oh, thanks, Sam.
Oh, thank you. And I think it's important because you just highlighted something, and I think that's the key. Media has part of this bias has been to, just like with equity, it is meant to dehumanize and to separate, to divide individuals, saying, oh, no, you can't have a conversation with them because not only is it a microaggression, but they're going to be violent and angry and they won't hear. No. How do you know you have a good idea unless you get outside your echo chamber and ask someone and confront them and say, and here's my idea. Here's why I think are the strong points or the weak points. Let me present that to you. And then when someone comes back and says, okay, let me challenge you. How do you know you have a good position if the only people who are telling you that are the same people? Oh, the ship is sinking. Yeah, but you know what? I don't think it will. Let's just sit over here and sing Kumbaya and it'll keep floating. No, it's sinking. Maybe if you step out of that Kumbaya and go over there and go to the guy with the welding kit and say, you know, maybe you want to weld that hole. Maybe you'll save everything. I know that's a weird. I'm thinking it up as I go. This is not obviously this is not scripted. But I think the point you can see there is we need to have that. And the media has part of this agenda is not just that they are biased, but also they don't want people to see that there can be anything except that bias. Because if you do, then you and I, Charles, we're having a conversation, Larry. We've had many conversations where we disagree. And then we work through the details and it's like, okay, so here's that element. I can work with that. I can maybe
let me
do something.
Grab a couple more things if I could. Andrew brings a very important part. He says Sinclair bought out local news and made it terrible. Yeah. And I think it's a very valid point. I think he's totally on the money with that. Andrew's right.
Yeah.
And so now it's very hard to find actual local news.
It's syndicated. Horrible.
Yes, they're somehow syndicated. 100%. I think it's very true. But the thing that is genius about Sinclair, I'm not happy about this. I'm just giving respect to it. Is it looks like it's real local news. They've done a very good job of putting a facade on it as no, this is just the local people who love you, right? But they're really just pretty people who can read well,
except when they get 100 of their
read well.
Except when they have 100 of their channels all at the same time,
saying the same thing,
the exact same paragraph.
Yes,
so
that's my point. They're pretty
bizarre.
They are very good-looking men and women who can read well. That's who your reporters are. They're just people who can read well.
I feel like I know how you feel about this, Mike, and you have the belief that at universities they're only teaching a left agenda. But really in my classes, it's important for me that all students be able to discuss their viewpoints and perspective and to have open dialogue like we are here. Because I think the biggest tool as educators that we can give others is the ability to critically think for yourself and to search for and observe multiple different perspectives and understandings of things and come to a conclusion on your own. So if you're a good educator, that's what you should be focused on doing. It should never be to introduce some sort of innate bias within your students.
And I love that. And I wish we saw that more often. But as a fact, looking at Binghamton University, 2018, 2019, looking at Cooper Union, I just gave an example of that, looking at Harvard University, going to UMass, going to Cornell University. We are not seeing that. We are seeing indoctrination. We're seeing that students are being taught a certain ideology without any other critical thinking, and they have been told that anyone who disagrees with you, it is immediately a microaggression at the least and should be responded to in violence equal or exceeding what the microaggression that has been put against you. We are seeing this ideology consistently. Look at where the hate is coming from. Look at the anti-Semitism.
I'm going to reinforce this. I have taught at Baruch, college. I have taught at the graduate level of Yale and Columbia. I have also taught as a secondary piece at Fordham. So I've taught many different places around this area. And I am the oddball, right? Charla and I are the oddballs. They exist, and there are more of us. They exist. It's not like all of us, but we are the oddballs. And I've had students complain because I would say things that are real. Like, and I would always preface it. Let me tell you, this is my experience, what's actually happened. I was explaining how that if you create zero tolerance policies, how it can actually punish female executives. And I gave an example of how it has actually happened and how you have to watch out how you can wind up trying to do a good thing and actually wind up hurting your female executives if you don't institute things correctly. And I got complaints. He's talking about punishing female executives. No, I'm trying to show you how not to do that. That was literally what I was explaining what actually happened, how top female executives can be punished by policies that are trying in theory to help, how it can actually punish them. And I got complaints because you're punishing women. How dare you say it about women? Women are wonderful. I was like, wow. So
I've had the same situation during, because I used to teach at UMass Boston. That's where I did my PhD. I taught U.S. politics and international relations during the year that Trump was elected. So it was a lot of times that I would receive complaints from both those leaning to the left and those leaning to the right about specific conversations that I would allow students to have, because at some time both of them felt like it was being insensitive to allow the students to be able to speak their own voice.
Yes,
I've had that. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, no, it's a balancing act when you're doing it well, and you're going to get complaints from both sides. And that's when you know kind of you're speaking in a more realistic tone, because you shouldn't just be having to whitewash and make something digestible so not to like upset someone's feelings.
See, and I agree with you. And I haven't taught classes, but I've spoken at several colleges, and I've done speeches on multiple topics at these colleges. And I've seen the local school newspapers and how they reported it. By the way, one of them in particular decided to say that because I was talking about socialism, my experience in Russia, and living in Moscow, they declared that I was a Russian, that I was born in Russia. I was like, really? My mom?
Wow.
This is news to everyone. You know, the United States government is really shocked by this.
Mike, no, you didn't vote for Joe Biden, so you're not black, so they made you Russian.
You know,
that's what it is. That's what happened. They assigned you as Russian now. That's what it is. Okay,
exactly. But it's that mentality again. It is that closed mind, and again, you're highlighting what I've just mentioned at the beginning. Look at how the bias affects. It's not that everyone in all news media is left leaning and socialist and progressive. I'm not saying that, but I am pointing out, but there's about 80, 82, 87% that are. And just like in our colleges where you have the oddball is the person not running down that leftward leaning cliff, jumping off that cliff, but rather being someone who's centrist, and nowadays, if you're centrist, you're on the right. If you're centrist, you're on the right because you're not going with the indoctrination. You're not following the path that everyone else has.
Hold on, let me touch two of these pieces that you just brought up. One, you're right, but I just don't think that the mainstream media matters as much, anywhere near as much as it used to. And the people who are not mainstream, many of them, to be very forward with you, they aren't going into college. They don't care about college. They're not going to Ivy League. To try to find an Ivy Leaguer who's doing something good on the internet, I mean, you're searching for that. That is very rare. That's half of these guys haven't even finished college. Most of them dropped out of college. They haven't even finished college. They went into being YouTubers when they were 17, 18, 19. And now they didn't even bother finishing college. If they did, they went to some community college or whatever. It's very rare to find an Ivy Leaguer doing the work that I think is effective. I would bet, you mentioned like Vass. Vass affects more people than half of the people on TV. So does Tim Pool. So clearly Joe Rogan. Yeah. I mean, you name the people. Cenk Uygur, who's running for president now. I mean, just keep going, right? They affect more people than the average, guy or gal on anchoring some TV show.
Yeah, yes, I definitely agree. Particularly to Americans under 40.
Yes,
but
I think
who's
it's
getting
completely
elected?
different.
But who's getting elected? Who's getting into those positions of power?
I haven't had cable television for 20
They're coming
years.
from the colleges. They're coming from the schools.
I'm not sure that's true because I'm looking at New York City. You're in New York City now too, Mike. You see what the DSA is doing. And while the DSA isn't socialist, it's as left as you can get in the Democratic Party.
Yeah.
You can't
Democratic
get any further left
Socialists
than
of
DSA.
America.
Yeah.
Yes, you can't get more left than them in the Democratic. I mean, outside the
yes,
DSA, there's more people
outside
left.
of mainstream politics. Yes.
Correct. You can. But
Antifa.
in mainstream politics, well, the Antifa is not mainstream politics.
And no, you don't see Antifa representation.
They don't vote. No, those guys don't vote, Mike.
Okay, they don't
Those
vote.
guys don't vote.
I'll give you that.
They don't vote.
Yeah.
So mainstream politics, you cannot get further left than DSA. And I think they're actually winning. They're doing in certain areas.
In certain
New
areas.
York City, they're killing it in New York City. Like
especially
everybody,
around like labor rights.
Oh my God, they're doing a good job. I mean, they are absolutely doing a good job.
Promise free
There's
stuff
like,
and lie and misrepresent the policies.
No, they're tired of the failures of New York State in general. And what I always say that the left does better than the right without question is rhetoric. Left rhetoric is always better than right rhetoric.
Yes.
Right rhetoric is pull yourself by your bootstraps. Left rhetoric is we love you, we care. It is always better rhetoric.
Let's do this together.
Correct. That's far better rhetoric. So they're going to win on that when that's the only option. So I do think that, and DSA is generally speaking, not Harvard, not Yale.
No, and I would say not college educated, lots of tradesmen.
Actually, let's think about Anna Presley, AOC.
AOC is not Harvard.
She's not. I didn't say
Boston
she's
University.
Ivy.
Yeah,
she's Ivy.
No,
just because they're not Harvard or Yale doesn't mean they're not in the top tier. She was top tier. She was Brown. Brown is Ivy.
I thought she was. You sure she's Brown? I don't think that's true.
I thought she was Brown.
I'm not sure.
I thought she's Boston University.
Yeah, I don't think she's Brown. I don't think she's Ivy. I don't think she is.
She's not Ivy.
Yeah.
But I would say but she's also not a part of like mainstream DSA either.
She's the very face of it.
Well, no, she is.
She's the whole point that they even have a name.
Yeah, she's DSA. She is. She's officially. She's my congressperson. She's officially DSA. My assembly person is DSA, and my city council person DSA. And that's everyone who represents me is DSA. Now, don't get me wrong. Tiffany Caban, who is my city council, is far more DSA than AOC. I mean, far more. And so is Zorhan Mandami. He's my son, and I had him on my show. He is far more DSA.
Is she endorsed by DSA or is she running as a DSA member?
Oh, no. She's not a DSA member. No, she's endorsed by them.
But she's endorsed. Yeah, they endorse a lot of Democrats. I wouldn't necessarily constitute that the people who are endorsing her from DSA, they're definitely, like, as you said, most of them didn't go to college. Most of them are labor unionists. And it's definitely just a different vibe. And I would say they probably also associate a lot with libertarianism and anarchism in more general than they do Democratic.
Well, they come on my show. They talk to me. I've been to DSA events.
Yeah.
So
I'm,
things we do connect.
I'm a member of DSA here in Michigan. So
you know. There we go. Yes, you know. Absolutely. So let me take a couple things if I could real fast. Guys, if you like this, then do me a favor. Click that like button. I know you say it, you watch it, then do me a favor. Actually click it. If you're watching on Twitter, please retweet this. It does matter. And these two wonderful people have given me yet another hour of their time. So please show them some love. Follow Twitter. Follow Mike on Twitter at MB Consult. And please follow Charla at Venture Novelist on Instagram. And we do have a couple fan things I do want to say here. If I can grab a couple of these. Hold on. Yes, at Boston University, everyone's saying it is BU. You are correct, Charla. It is BU. That's what she was on. I had a feeling she was that too. So yes. And a couple comments.
I stand corrected on that.
The only reason why I remember that is because remember when they found that tape of her dancing
on the
BU and they like threw a fit because how dare somebody in mainstream politics be sexy?
Absolutely. So King of the Swamp likes you, Charlie. I like Charlotte too. Sick tats. So you've got some fans. So there we go. You do have some fans. Some fans. Andrew says, I like part of the show where Mike and Charlotte agree for like 2 minutes. That's really good. That's good. Roger says, Vass, there's nothing progressive about BlackRock. Socialism is shared co-op ownership of the economy by workers in the community, meaning ownership of companies, supply chains, government, and nothing to do with it. And I think he has a point. I think BlackRock is yes, liberal, right? Not left. And I think there's a nuance, but I think an important one. And I think what BlackRock would prefer is the liberal status quo. They like that status quo. It's where they make their money. It's how they have the most power. I think that's the issue. I do not think BlackRock wants us to move towards socialism or anything like that at all.
Well, no, it would take their wealth away. It would redistribute the wealth. It's because of the Democrats, and I would say also the Republican Party, that we have such a wide wealth gap here in the United States. Because they've always been protecting the rich elites, and I think that the reason why the Democrats seem to have more power now is that they're more into being able to protect those rights, because now there's a diversity of rich people rather than just white.
Well, let's understand that modern socialism that we've seen around the world, because communism only exists if it's everywhere in the world. And that's something that all the socialists love to point out, and the communists in their new versions of it that we keep saying, no, this time it'll work. Okay. Let's understand, in all the socialist nations we have seen and under the systems that are being promoted, because BlackRock is a functionary. They are there to enact the policies of the WEC, the WEF, the World Economic Forum, World Economic Council. What we have seen in the socialism is they are in fact oligarchies that are controlled by a small board of individuals who have entirely different lives and are highly privileged, converse to their mass population, which are living basically in poverty or slightly above and have an extremely low quality of life. We have seen that in every single country where we have seen socialism actually enacted. Venezuela being the most recent and most obvious example of that. That's why Bernie Sanders stopped talking about it. It's why everyone wants to try and convince everyone that Denmark and the Netherlands are somehow socialist when they're not. Having socialist policies doesn't make you socialist. Venezuela is socialist. And we saw what happened there.
Sweden has been run by the Swedish Social Democratic Party for many years and identify as
Ask
socialist.
the Swedes, and they will tell you they are not socialist. You look at their government and how it is set up and how it functions. It is not socialist. It has many socialist programs. It has a lot of socialist ideology interwoven in it. It is not socialist.
I don't think America's going to become socialist. I think, and again, this is not my policy. You know, my policies are not that. Yeah. But I think what they're looking for is this idea of more socialism within a democracy to make a fairer world for people. I think that is their goal. I mean, maybe the leaders think this, but I can't imagine any individual socialist on the ground thinking, I can't wait for a dictatorship. I don't think they're thinking that at all.
On the ground never have a choice about it.
As a part of our democracy, as in France from 2012 to 2017 was run by a socialist party. Finland,
the socialist party, their government isn't socialist.
Party.
No. Again, individuals being in there, whether they're in charge, that having a socialist party in a system, a government that isn't socialist, doesn't make it socialist. It just means that you have someone at the wheel. The latest person at the wheel happened to be turning it. No, socialist governments are, as an example, Cuba, North Korea, China, the former Soviet Union. We're talking about Venezuela. Those are socialist governments. There is a difference between someone at the helm who has a socialist idea like
I would argue that when socialist parties are at the helm, some of the best, most industrialized, most prosperous countries on earth are ran by socialist parties.
And I would definitely say you're wrong.
I think on Sweden, that's incorrect. There's many documents on that where Sweden actually, as socialists took over, everything began to collapse, and they actually reopened their markets because socialism actually began to collapse their economy in the 80s. I think it's right. I'll send you some data on that.
I'm talking about like currently Sweden is ran by a socialist party.
Sweden and Switzerland have been moving towards a conservative government.
2017 were also run.
Matter of fact, wasn't it just in the most recent election that Sweden actually elected a conservative, right-wing conservative government? They were part of the movement along with Italy, and there's been several countries.
It's a lot of anti-immigrant sentiment. A lot of anti-immigrant sentiment in Sweden.
Conservative.
Recently, Sweden has had a lot of anti-immigrant sentiment, and it has brought in a much more far right-wing government for Sweden, right? I mean, Sweden,
for Sweden,
it's relative, right? So it's not like Yeah, it's relevant, but they have brought it. Yeah, recently that has happened.
But
So,
they are
yes,
going conservative. So not
they are
socialist.
moving towards that. And a lot of it's anti-immigrant sentiment. I think they brought so many immigrants in. The people have what they. One thing that
Destroyed their
people don't
country.
get about America is while no country does immigrants great, America does it the best.
Yes.
Of all of the countries, nobody does it great, but in the terribleometer, America's at the lowest level. we are the best at dealing with immigrants than any other country on the planet. There's no question. I mean, that's absolutely true. So we are doing that well. So I do want to, if I can, a couple of these things I'm going to bring up real fast. Dave says, remember, European countries are multi-party systems. Also true.
Parliament,
so make things, Yep, that does make it a little bit easier. That is true. Roger brings up saying social something with the government. It's workers owning the economy, which actually I don't have that much of a problem with that. But I don't think most people get that, Roger. I think the average person does not understand what you're saying. And I'm agreeing with what you're saying. I'm saying I think that most people do not get that at all. And the last thing I'm going to bring up is Andrew says, BX all day. That is correct. That is
Bronx,
correct. Bronx. Absolutely. Both Vass and I are from the Bronx. It's very good that we're both from the Bronx. Sorry, y'all. It does make me and him cooler than you. So I'm just saying, just how it works. That's how it works.
Totally makes you cooler than me.
There we go. That's how it works. That's
totally does.
So, guys, I want to say, everybody who's watching, thank you so much. I do want to ask before we wrap this up, Vass, tell me what you're doing this weekend. What's going on? Where can we watch you?
Every Sunday, 2:30 p.m., I do a live stream where everyone in the world can reach out to us. I'm going to be covering things like what's been going on with the colleges in terms of Hamas. We'll be talking about, well, obviously the Republican debates, what's going to happen in 2024, the fortification of 2024, and a few other things. So we got a lot going on there.
There we go. Head on over to see about No Soundbites Allowed. Charlotte, tell us what you're doing.
Yeah, so I've been working with a group of sex workers here in Lansing to open up a dance studio and sex education center. So we're going to be working on the business plans for that and reaching out to various educators across the state to come and teach.
Awesome. Can people find out about that on your Instagram or
someplace else? Yeah, you can. It's the business is going to be called the Harlot's Haven, and you can check it out. It's on Instagram, Patreon, TikTok, OnlyFans, bunch of places. So check it out.
There we go. I love it. And tomorrow I will be on Dan Abrams Live on News Nation at 9 p.m. So if you guys want to watch me, I'll be yapping about stuff there. If you want to see me then, of course, I also have my show tomorrow evening. I have an author on at 7 p.m. So you can see me there too. And Michael Vass and I have a birthday together. This Saturday is the Marine Corps birthday, November 10th. This Saturday. Yep. So it is our birthday. Yes, it is our birthday. So we always celebrate it every year. For those who don't know, the Marine Corps birthday is November 10th, 1775. Everybody have a great day.
Older than America.
There we go. Yes, 1 year older than America. That's true. We are 1 year old. That's correct. We're older than America's our little brother. That's okay.
That's cute.
I love it. All right, guys. Good seeing you all. I will see you all